The dim light of the research station's observation deck cast long shadows across James Miller's tired face. He stared out into the endless void of space, watching the strange purple storms that made this sector of space so unique. After 6 months alone on Research Station 47, even the violent cosmic weather had become routine. James rubbed his eyes and took another sip of his coffee. As the station's sole xenobiologist, his job was to document and study any new life forms discovered in this unexplored region. So far, he had only found some interesting space bacteria and a few floating organisms that resembled Earth's jellyfish. The station's AI broke the silence. "Dr. Miller, I'm detecting an unusual energy signature approaching the station. It appears to be a living creature, but it's not matching any known patterns in our database." James straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. "Show me the readings, computer." A holographic display appeared before him, showing a mass of swirling energy readings. Whatever was out there was big, at least the size of a small shuttle. But what caught his attention were the life signs. They were erratic, suggesting the creature was injured. "Computer, prepare the emergency containment bay. I'm going to try to help it." "Warning," the AI responded. "Initial scans indicate extreme danger potential. The creature's biological structure suggests it is an apex predator. Station protocols require." "Override protocols," James cut in. "Authorization Miller 74. This is a medical emergency." The creature drew closer to the station, and James got his first real look at it through the observation window. His breath caught in his throat. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Its body was covered in what looked like shifting plates of darkness, absorbing the light around it. 6 powerful limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, and its head bore multiple sets of eyes that glowed with an inner fire. But James could see the creature was hurt. A large wound on its side leaked a strange, silvery fluid that sparkled in the starlight. The creature's movements were weak and uncoordinated. James rushed to the containment bay, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. This was exactly the kind of discovery he had dreamed of when he took this assignment. As he entered the bay in his protective suit, the massive creature was already being guided in by the station's tractor beams. Up close, the being was even more impressive. Despite its injuries, it moved with a deadly grace that spoke of immense power. Its multiple eyes fixed on James, and he felt a chill run down his spine. There was intelligence in those eyes, far more than he would expect from a simple predator. "Easy there," James said softly, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "I just want to help you." The creature made a sound that seemed to bypass his ears and vibrate directly in his mind. It wasn't exactly words, but James could sense meaning behind it. Pain, confusion, and a wary curiosity. "Computer, scan the creature's wound pattern. What are we dealing with?" "The injury appears to be caused by a high-energy weapon. The creature's biological structure is unlike anything in our records. Caution is highly advised." James slowly approached the wounded being, medical scanner in hand. The creature watched his every move but made no aggressive gestures. Instead, it slightly shifted its injured side toward him, as if it understood his intentions. "You're smart, aren't you?" James murmured. "A lot smarter than the computer thinks." As he began treating the wound with a universal healing compound, the creature remained perfectly still. Its eyes never left him, and occasionally it would make those strange mental vibrations that seemed to carry meaning. "Computer, send a message to Central Command. Tell them we've made first contact with an unknown species. Mark it as non-hostile. Dr. Miller, based on the creature's biological weapons and predatory features, I must classify it as extremely dangerous. Protocol requires." "Just send the message," James interrupted, "and prepare a long-term medical bay. Something tells me we're going to be learning a lot from each other." As if understanding his words, the creature made a sound that felt like agreement in James's mind. He smiled, knowing that this moment would change everything. Sometimes, the most important discoveries came not from following protocols, but from following your instincts. What neither James nor the computer knew was that this encounter would not only change their lives, but would reshape the understanding of intelligent life throughout the galaxy. 3 days after the rescue, James stood before the main observation window of the medical bay, watching his unusual patient with growing fascination. The creature, which he had begun documenting as a night hunter based on its ability to absorb light, was recovering faster than any life form he had ever studied. "Your healing rate is remarkable," he said, making notes on his tablet. The night hunter turned its head toward him, its multiple eyes shifting colors in what James had begun to recognize as a form of expression. The silvery wound on its side had already sealed, leaving only a faint trace of the injury that had brought it to the station. The station's AI interrupted his observations. "Dr. Miller, incoming priority transmission from Central Command." A holographic screen appeared, showing Admiral Thompson's stern face. "Dr. Miller, we've received your initial report about the creature you're harboring. You are ordered to cease all personal contact and begin immediate containment procedures." James frowned. "Sir, with all due respect, this being is intelligent and peaceful. It hasn't shown any aggressive behavior." "That's because you haven't seen what its kind can do." The Admiral cut him off. "We've just cross-referenced your biological scans. This is a Class A threat species, responsible for multiple colony attacks in the outer sectors." The night hunter made a sound, a complex wave of mental energy that James felt as disagreement and frustration. Over the past days, he had begun to sense these communications more clearly. "Admiral, I believe there's more to this story. The night hunter is trying to communicate. It's not up for debate, Doctor. A research vessel will arrive in 48 hours. Until then, that creature is to be fully contained. That's an order." The transmission cut off, leaving James in troubled silence. He looked at the night hunter, which was now fully alert and watching him intently. "Computer, what exactly is a Class A threat species?" Class A threats are considered the most dangerous non-sentient life forms known to spacefaring civilizations. The species you have designated as Night Hunter matches records of creatures that have destroyed 3 mining colonies and 2 research stations in the past decade. James walked closer to the containment field. "But that doesn't make sense. You're not mindless or violent, are you?" The Night Hunter rose to its full height, its dark plates shifting like liquid shadow. It pressed one clawed limb against the energy field, and James felt a complex series of impressions wash over him. Images of vast, starlit spaces, of others like this being moving in coordinated patterns, of strange crystalline structures that seemed to be cities. "You have a civilization," James whispered in awe. "You're not just intelligent. You're an advanced species." The station AI spoke again. "Dr. Miller, I must remind you that contact with Class A threat species is strictly forbidden. Please step away from the containment field." Instead, James walked to the control panel. "Computer, reduce containment field strength by 50%. I need better readings on its communication attempts. That action violates station safety protocols. Please reconsider." "Override, authorization Miller 74. The field dimmed, and immediately the night hunter's mental impressions became clearer. James saw flashes of massive ships attacking peaceful night hunter settlements, of their people being hunted, of defending their ancient homes from invaders. The images carried overwhelming emotions, sorrow, anger, and a desperate need to be understood. "They've been lying about you," James said quietly. "You were protecting your worlds, weren't you?" The night hunter's response came as a wave of agreement and relief at being finally understood. It showed James more images, vast mineral deposits beneath their cities, aggressive mining operations, and corrupt officials accepting bribes to label night hunters as mindless beasts. "Computer, begin recording all this. I want every bit of data documented." James looked at the magnificent being before him. "We're going to need proof when that research vessel arrives." The night hunter's eyes glowed with an inner light, and James felt its gratitude. He knew he was breaking every protocol in the book, but sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. "Don't worry," he told his new friend. "We have 48 hours to find the truth. And I promise you, I won't let them turn you into a specimen in some lab." The creature's mental response carried something new, hope. And in that moment, James knew that his life's work had just begun. James sat cross-legged on the medical bay floor, his eyes closed in concentration. Across from him, the night hunter remained perfectly still, its dark plates rippling slightly as it projected another series of mental images. "Let me see if I understand," James said slowly. "Your species uses these mental projections as your primary form of communication." He felt a wave of confirmation wash over him. After a week of intensive study, James had begun to grasp the complex language of the night hunters. It wasn't just images and emotions. It was a rich, multidimensional form of communication that made human speech seem primitive in comparison. "Computer, note that the subject's communication method appears to be a form of controlled psychic projection, possibly utilizing quantum entanglement at the neural level." The night hunter, which James had started calling Shadow due to its light-absorbing properties, sent him an image of vast libraries filled with crystalline structures. Each crystal seemed to contain countless stored memories and knowledge. "Your people record their history in those crystals?" James asked, fascinated. The answering impression was both confirmation and an invitation. Shadow wanted to share more. Suddenly, the medical bay's lights flashed red. "Warning," the station AI announced. "Unknown energy patterns detected in Dr. Miller's brain activity. Recommend immediate cessation of contact." James sighed in frustration. "Computer, the energy patterns are just Shadow's communication method. It's perfectly safe. Safety protocols require." "Override authorization Miller 7-4." The warning lights stopped, but James could sense the AI's continued disapproval. Shadow sent him a new series of images, vast spaces between stars where night hunters traveled in groups, their bodies absorbing light and energy for sustenance. James saw their natural habitat for the first time, the dark spaces between solar systems, where they could feed on cosmic radiation and stellar winds. "That's why you were labeled as threats," James realized. "Your feeding grounds overlap with common shipping routes. But you're not attacking ships. You're just trying to feed." Shadow's response carried sadness and frustration. More images followed. Night hunters trying to avoid ships, being hunted anyway, retreating to the few safe spaces left to them. James quickly typed notes on his tablet. "Computer, calculate how many shipping routes could be safely redirected to avoid night hunter feeding grounds, assuming we map them properly." Based on current data, approximately 78% of affected routes could be adjusted with minimal impact on travel times. Shadow suddenly stood up, its massive form casting strange shadows in the medical bay's light. It projected an urgent series of images, other night hunters in danger, being tracked by ships with familiar markings. "Those are the same mining corporation logos from the colony attacks," James noted. "They're still hunting your people." The response was clear, yes, and time was running out. Shadow showed him images of a hidden gathering place where the remaining night hunters were meeting to decide their species' future. "You were their scout," James said as understanding dawned. "You were looking for potential allies when you were attacked." Shadow's mental impression was like a sad smile. It had found more than an ally. It had found proof that not all species would react to them with fear and violence. James stood up, determination clear on his face. "Computer, begin compiling all our data on night hunter intelligence and communication. Include comparative analysis with other sentient species development patterns." Dr. Miller, preparing such a report for a Class A threat species violates. "They're not a threat species," James interrupted firmly. "They're a highly advanced civilization that's been deliberately misclassified, and we're going to prove it." Shadow moved closer to the containment field, its eyes glowing with various colors. The mental impression it sent was complex, gratitude mixed with worry about the dangers James might face for helping them. "Don't worry about me," James said with a smile. "My people have a saying, 'The truth will set you free.' We just need to make sure everyone hears it." As if in response, Shadow began sharing more detailed memories of its civilization, their art, their sciences, their philosophy. James settled in to learn, knowing that every piece of information could help save this remarkable species from extinction. In the quiet of the medical bay, human and night hunter continued their exchange of knowledge, bridging a gap that had once seemed impossible to cross. The station shuddered as the military vessel locked onto its docking port. James stood in the medical bay, his heart racing as he heard the heavy footsteps of approaching soldiers. Shadow remained calm, its dark plates rippling slightly in the dim light. "They're here early," James muttered, checking the time. The research vessel wasn't due for another 12 hours. "Computer, identify the approaching ship." "Military cruiser Huntsman has initiated emergency docking procedures," Captain Robert Wells commanding. "They are citing Section 7 of the Dangerous Species Containment Act." The main door slid open with a hiss. 6 heavily armed soldiers filed in, followed by a tall man in a captain's uniform, his cold eyes fixed first on Shadow, then on James. "Dr. Miller," Captain Wells said, his voice hard, "step away from the containment field. That creature is to be terminated immediately." James didn't move. "On whose authority? This is a research station, and Shadow is an intelligent being under my protection." "Shadow," Wells sneered. "You've named it. This monster is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of colonists. We've been tracking it since it attacked mining outpost 23. Shadow's mental projection hit James with intense urgency. Images of the mining outpost, but very different from the official reports. He saw corporation ships attacking first, trying to drive night hunters from their ancestral feeding grounds. "You're lying," James said firmly. "Shadow showed me the truth. The night hunters never attacked anyone. They were defending themselves from illegal mining operations in their territory." Wells's face darkened. "Corporal, remove Dr. Miller from the medical bay." 2 soldiers moved forward, but James stood his ground. "Computer, initiate data broadcast protocol. Send all my research findings to every science station in the sector." "Belay that order," Wells shouted. Unable to comply, the station AI responded. "Dr. Miller's override codes have higher priority." Wells drew his weapon. "This is your last warning, Doctor. Step aside." Shadow suddenly moved, its massive form seeming to absorb all light in the room. But instead of attacking, it projected its memories, not just to James this time, but somehow broadcasting them strongly enough that everyone in the room could see them. The soldiers staggered as their minds filled with visions. Peaceful night hunter communities scattered through space, their children playing among the stars, their cities hidden in the void between solar systems. Then came the mining ships, the attacks, the desperate defense of their homes. What is this?" Wells whispered, his weapon wavering. "The truth," James said. "They're not monsters, they're refugees. Their civilization is older than humanity's, and we've been helping corporations destroy it for profit." Shadow's mental broadcast continued, showing the soldiers how night hunters had tried to communicate peacefully, how they had saved stranded ships, how they had even attempted to share their technology, only to be met with fear and violence. One of the soldiers lowered his weapon. "Sir, these images, they feel real. Like memories." "It's a trick," Wells insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. The station AI spoke up. "Captain Wells, I have completed analysis of the night hunter's mental projections. They match all criteria for verified historical records. Additionally, I have found discrepancies in the official reports of night hunter attacks. Many appear to have been falsified." James took a step forward. "Captain, you have a choice. You can either help us expose this cover-up, or you can be part of it. What's it going to be?" Wells looked at his soldiers, who were still processing Shadow's shared memories. His hand tightened on his weapon, then slowly lowered it. "If what you're showing us is true," he said quietly, "this goes all the way to the top of the mining coalition." Shadow's response was immediate. More images of corrupt officials, secret meetings, payoffs to keep the Night Hunters classified as dangerous beasts. "Computer," James called out, "are you still broadcasting?" "Affirmative. Research data and mental projections are being transmitted to 147 science stations, multiple acknowledgments receiving." Wells holstered his weapon. "Doctor, I think you and your friend here better tell me everything. And I mean everything." As the soldiers relaxed their stance, Shadow sent James a feeling of hope mixed with caution. They had won this battle, but the real fight was just beginning. The command center of Research Station 47 hummed with activity. James, Captain Wells, and 3 of his best intelligence officers sat around a holotable, while Shadow loomed behind them, its dark form making the room feel larger than it was. "These records go back 20 years, James said, pointing to the data streams floating above the table. "The mining coalition didn't just hide the truth. They created an elaborate lie about Night Hunter aggression." Shadow projected a series of coordinates, which the station AI quickly translated into a star map. Red dots appeared across the display, marking the locations of supposed Night Hunter attacks. "Computer, overlay mining claim registrations for these sectors," Wells commanded. New data appeared, showing a pattern that made James lean forward. "Look at the dates. Every single attack happened within weeks of the coalition filing new mining claims." One of the intelligence officers, Lieutenant Reed, pulled up another file. "Sir, I found something in the coalition's private communications. They called it Operation Dark Space." The documents floated before them, their contents standing. Shadow's mental projection carried a wave of controlled anger as the truth was finally revealed in human terms. "They knew," James said quietly. "They knew the Night Hunters were intelligent. This memo from their chief scientist specifically mentions attempting communication." Wells read through the document, his face growing darker. "And they deliberately chose to classify them as non-sentient predators. It gave them legal cover to exterminate threats to mining operations." Shadow shared a memory then, a peaceful meeting between Night Hunters and Coalition representatives. The Night Hunters had offered to share their knowledge of safe energy harvesting from cosmic radiation. The Coalition had responded by opening fire. "The Night Hunters could have taught us so much," James said, shaking his head. "Instead, the Coalition chose profit over first contact." Lieutenant Reed suddenly straightened. "Captain, I've cracked their secondary encryption. You need to see this." New files filled the air: profit projections, mineral surveys, and most importantly, a list of paid officials who had helped maintain the lie. 3 admirals, Wells said grimly. 2 sector governors, even judges. He turned to James. "No wonder your earlier reports were ignored." Shadow moved closer to the holotable, its plates shifting in patterns that James had learned to recognize as deep thought. It projected a new series of images: hidden Night Hunter cities, safe from Coalition ships, but poor in resources. Their civilization was slowly dying. "Computer," James called out, "compile all this evidence into a secure package. Include Shadow's mental recordings and my research data. Prepare it for transmission to every major news outlet in human space." "Doctor," Wells warned, "that's going to cause chaos. The Coalition has powerful friends." "Good," James replied firmly. "Let them try to explain this to the public. Shadow, can you show them what your people could teach us, what we're losing by driving you away?" The Night Hunters' response filled their minds with incredible visions: ships that could ride solar winds, cities that drew power from the void itself, medical techniques that could heal almost any injury. The watching humans sat in stunned silence. "My God," Lieutenant Reed whispered, "we've been so wrong." The station ally interrupted. "Warning. Multiple ships detected entering the sector. Mining Coalition signatures identified." Wells stood up, his decision made. Computer, execute that data broadcast now. Lieutenant, get our ship ready for emergency departure. He looked at James. Doctor, I hope you're ready to testify before the Galactic Council, because that's where this is heading. Shadow's mental impression carried both gratitude and concern. More images flowed. Other night hunters who needed to know it was safe to emerge, to make contact. We'll protect them, James promised, understanding Shadow's worry. The truth is out now. They can't hide it anymore. As the station's warning lights began to flash, James looked at the evidence floating above the table, proof of humanity's greatest mistake, and perhaps its greatest opportunity. Computer, begin emergency protocols, he ordered. And save everything. The galaxy needs to know the whole story. The truth about the night hunters was finally emerging. Now they just had to survive long enough to tell it. The bridge of the huntsmen vibrated as another mining vessel's weapons fire struck their shields. Captain Wells stood at the command center, his face illuminated by the tactical displays. Shields at 60%, reported Lieutenant Reed. 3 more coalition ships entering weapons range. James watched from his position near the rear of the bridge as Shadow moved through the darkness like liquid night. The night hunter had insisted on staying on the bridge, its mental projections helping predict enemy movements. They're trying to stop us from reaching the Galactic Council station, James said, interpreting Shadow's urgent warnings. But there's something else. Shadow says we're close to one of their hidden settlements. Shadow's mental images filled their minds. Hundreds of night hunters waiting in the void, watching the battle unfold. They were afraid, but also ready. Captain, James called out, if we drop our shields for 10 seconds, Shadow says its people can help. Wells looked at the tactical display where 5 coalition ships were closing in. Drop our shields. That's suicide. Shadow projected a clear sequence of events, a plan that made James smile. Trust us, Captain. Sometimes the best defense isn't what you expect. Wells studied the approaching ships, then nodded grimly. All hands, braced for shield drop. Lieutenant, on my mark. The coalition ships drew closer, their weapons charging. Shadow moved to the center of the bridge, its form seeming to grow larger. Now, Wells commanded. The shields dropped. In that instant, Shadow broadcast a powerful mental call. The void around them suddenly came alive as dozens of night hunters emerged from their hiding places. They moved like living shadows, absorbing all energy weapons fire directed at the huntsmen. By all the stars, Lieutenant Reed whispered as they watched the night hunters surround the coalition ships. No weapons could harm them now. They were in their element, dancing through space like cosmic predators. They're not attacking, James noted, feeling Shadow's satisfaction. They're just containing. Indeed, the night hunters had formed a barrier around the coalition ships, neutralizing their weapons while leaving them otherwise unharmed. It was a display of power and restraint that no one could mistake for mindless aggression. Coalition vessels, this is Captain Wells. Wells broadcast on all frequencies. You are witnessing first contact with a peaceful, advanced civilization. Stand down or be recorded as the aggressors in what will become a historic moment. Shadow projected images to all ships in range, memories of their civilization, their achievements, their peaceful attempts at communication. One by one, the coalition ships powered down their weapons. Sir, Lieutenant Reed called out, we're receiving transmissions from the Night Hunter settlement. They're broadcasting on our frequencies. James felt Shadow's surge of joy. They've been learning our technology, preparing for this moment. They want to talk. The main screen lit up with an unprecedented sight. A gathering of night hunters, their forms shifting in complex patterns as they communicated with each other, and now with humanity. This is Commander Wells of Earth Forces, Wells said formally. On behalf of humanity, we acknowledge your sentience and sovereignty. We request peaceful dialogue. The response came as a combination of mental images and actual transmitted words. The night hunters had created a translation system. Their message was simple but profound. We accept. Let us build bridges between stars. James looked at Shadow, who was projecting feelings of triumph and hope. Computer, are we still broadcasting? Affirmative. This entire encounter is being transmitted to the Galactic Council and all major news networks. Coalition ships hung suspended in space, surrounded by living proof of their lies. Night hunters emerged from hiding, ready to take their place in galactic society. And aboard the Huntsman, humans and night hunters began the real work of building trust. Shadow, James said quietly, your people were worth waiting for. The night hunter's response filled everyone's minds with a vision of the future. Human and night hunter ships traveling together, sharing knowledge, exploring the darkness between stars not as enemies, but as allies. The bridge crew watched in awe as more night hunters appeared, their forms creating patterns of breathtaking beauty against the starfield. The alliance had begun. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with excited tension. Representatives from 100 worlds filled the tiered seats, their attention fixed on the central platform, where James stood beside Shadow. The night hunter's dark form seemed to bend the light around it, creating an effect that made many counselors lean forward in fascination. Distinguished members of the council, James began, his voice steady despite his nervousness. 3 months ago, humanity made a grave error in judgment. Today, we come to correct it. Behind him, a holographic display showed the evidence they had gathered. The mining coalition's lies, the peaceful nature of night hunter civilization, and the incredible technological advances they had achieved. The beings we wrongly labeled as mindless predators, James continued, have mastered technologies we can barely comprehend. They don't just survive in deep space, they have built an entire civilization in the void between stars. Shadow stepped forward, its mental projections now refined through the translation devices they had developed together. The chamber filled with images of night hunter achievements, cities built from crystalline structures that harvested cosmic energy, ships that could fold space without engines, medical techniques that could heal almost any injury. Remarkable, whispered the chief counselor, an elderly being from a species known for their caution. But how can we be certain these beings are truly peaceful? In response, Shadow showed the recent confrontation with the coalition ships, how the night hunters had chosen to disable rather than destroy their attackers, even after years of persecution. Captain Wells, now promoted to admiral, stepped forward. In the past 3 months, night hunter technology has already helped us rescue 17 stranded ships in deep space. They don't just want peace, they want to help. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives processed this information. James felt Shadow's gentle mental touch, sharing its hope for the future. The coalition representative stood up, his face red with anger. This is a trick. These creatures destroyed our colonies. Like this? James interrupted, triggering another holographic display. Security footage showed coalition forces attacking peaceful night hunter settlements, followed by fabricated evidence blaming the night hunters for destruction they didn't cause. The chamber fell silent. We propose a new beginning, James said into the quiet. The night hunters offer to share their knowledge of deep space travel and energy harvesting. In return, they ask only for recognition of their rights and territory. Shadow projected images of joint human night hunter space stations, of shared research projects, of a future where both species explored the galaxy together. The chief counselor stood. Dr. Miller, you have risked much to bring us this truth. What guarantees can you offer that cooperation between our peoples is possible? James smiled and gestured to Shadow. Look around you. Every night hunter in this chamber could have killed everyone here in seconds. Instead, they come offering friendship. They defy our expectations not through violence, but through wisdom. Shadow moved to the center of the platform, its form seeming to grow as it projected its most powerful vision yet, a galaxy where different species work together, learning from each other, turning the darkness between stars into bridges rather than barriers. The vote was overwhelming. The Night Hunters were officially recognized as a sovereign, sentient species. The Mining Coalition's leadership was arrested for crimes against sapient beings, and James found himself appointed as the first ambassador to the Night Hunter Confederation. As the chamber emptied, James turned to Shadow. "Well, my friend, we did it." Shadow's response carried both joy and amusement, a reminder of that first day in the medical bay when James had defied protocols to help an injured monster. Admiral Wells approached them, grinning. "The Joint Research Station is approved. You'll have everything you need to build those bridges you talked about." James felt Shadow's satisfaction. The Night Hunter projected an image of their first meeting, but now seen from its perspective, showing how it had recognized James's compassion, even while injured and afraid. "We really need to stop calling them Night Hunters," James said thoughtfully. "They have their own name for themselves." Shadow projected the true name of its species, a complex concept that meant those who dance among stars. As they left the chamber together, human and star dancer side by side, James realized that sometimes the greatest discoveries came not from conquering the unknown, but from reaching out to it with an open heart. The darkness between stars had never seemed brighter.